Hey everybody, I'm Sean Patrick and welcome to The Good House and to our 2023 panel on inclusivity. This year our topic being, does inclusivity help us flourish? Today I am joined by my co-CEO and author of 10 Principles for a Life Worth Living, Karen Mills-Alston. How are you?
I'm well. It's good to be here.
4 years, fourth time.
years. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yes,
know.
yes, yes.
Um,
Congratulations.
oh yes, thank you.
Yes.
Reverend Cynthia Ambriz, author of Life Finds a Way. How are you doing?
Amazingly well, thank you.
How has it been since your book came out last year?
It has taken on a life of its own, and I'm amazed at the work that it's doing in the world.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I mean, I must have said that when we were working together, but a book does find a life of its own, and before you know it, it's popping up in so many places. So I'm really glad you're having that experience that we knew you'd have. And Jason A. Benefield, author of The Essential Pain and Peace of Life. How are you?
Oh, fantastic. Life is good, sir.
Life is good. And this is this is a great panel. And I'm really excited that we get to continue to have this conversation. Take it in our cue from what being the theme of flourishing. So it's incredible to look at this question through that lens. So I just want to throw that question out there first. How do you believe inclusivity helps us flourish? Karen, I'll go to you.
Oh, well, inclusivity opens us up.
Mhm.
It allows us to interact with individuals, organizations, um, having different experiences that we would not have if we were not including those things in our lives. So it opens us up to the infinite possibilities of flourishing, in ways that we couldn't even imagine that we were flourishing. So I love this word inclusivity. I love this word flourishing because it means that we get to grow and expand in consciousness. And we can do that kicking and screaming, or we can do that with grace and a combination of both. So it can be fun too.
Yeah, yeah. What is flourishing to you?
Oh, I often say that the world says that we we can thrive, we can survive, we can thrive, and then flourishing is the next level. So we can so surviving is not what I want to do. I don't Thriving is fine, you know. Flourishing is flourishing. It's just being more than I can possibly imagine. Michael Beckworth has the life visioning process. So to me, that's opening myself up to my growing edge. It's opening myself up to the highest and the best for my life. That's what flourishing is for me.
Yeah, and just thinking of, we talked about Reverend Cynthia's book, having a life of its own. To
Yeah.
me, thriving is when your life is working really well, but
Mhm.
you're having to constantly
Right.
spin the wheels. Flourishing is when your well-being is taking on a life of its own. That's
Yes.
how I see it.
Yes,
Um,
and we act like that.
Yeah.
We act like that all the time. So we are, we all do our spiritual practices. So we make sure that those things are that we're living that high vibe. I'll
Yeah.
call it that. Well, we're living that high vibe life all the time. Yes.
So, Reverend Cynthia, how do you believe that flourishing, that inclusivity helps us flourish?
One of the statements that I came across a few years ago felt very novel to me at the time. The statement was, "Can I know that I belong without needing to fit in?"
Oh,
Mm,
wow.
that's
And
good.
it gave me permission to discover what it meant to be me and not make adjustments on who Cynthia is based on my environment or my surroundings.
Mm,
And it allowed me to remain consistently me even as I continue to flourish.
Mhm.
Yeah.
mhm.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it gives us permission, this inclusivity of knowing that we belong without needing to fit in, and accepting our uniqueness. And when I accept my own uniqueness, then I can accept the uniqueness of others.
Yes,
Mm.
it's
Mm.
beautiful.
That's good. That's really
Mhm.
good.
It
Yeah, and
really
you
is.
really touch on, this idea of masking, how so often we're negotiating who we are to best be accepted by the world that we're playing in. And I guess we'll get into that more. But if, yeah, the more, I think we can all agree, the more authentically you can live your life,
Mhm.
the better.
Mm.
Jason, how would you answer that question?
Oh man, I'll answer it by my own life.
Hmm.
How I examined my whole life based on the book that I wrote, because of the fact that I wanted to know more of who I am as spirit, but then also wanting to see the end before the beginning. Always, I always wanted to know exactly that no matter what, I'm being taken care of. So flourishing to me is just constantly being on the upbeat and allowing
Mhm.
myself to constantly grow, because there was nothing else that there were other things that I did know, but it wasn't until I really continued to stay on the path of the type of life that I know I can have, and the
Hmm.
type of life that I know I wanted. And so flourishing is just continuing to be my full self, moment by moment by moment. And that's how I see what flourishing is for me.
Yeah. What, I think if I answer that question, like both logically and I guess more emotionally, uh, I am the white man on this panel, and
Are you?
I
I didn't
am.
notice. I didn't notice
Well,
that.
I
Thank
have
you.
to say it so people know that I know. That people know that I know. Um, but here's something I didn't know, because often when we're talking about inclusivity, it's another word for what other people might say diversity.
Mm,
But oftentimes when we're talking about that, we're talking about including the non-normative, which is usually the white, into whatever it is.
mm,
Um, but when we say, oh, the minority, so to speak,
Yes,
um,
yes.
mm,
but actually, the phrase global majority has started to be used because global majority is non-white people. And I actually,
mm,
doing more research on this, white people only make up, I think, 15% of the world's population. So to only operate within that, you are 85% of the world's talent, creativity
mm.
is not going to be in the mix. And I didn't know the statistic was that vast. So that's how I'd answer it logically about in regards to how does inclusivity include flourishing, because you're including 85% more of the world's
Mm,
population.
mhm.
And then on a more visceral level, that 85% bring so much culture, levels, differences. I I don't even know what the correct words are, but I know you know what I mean. It it makes for more of a exciting world to live in. So
Yes.
that's how I feel that
Mhm.
um, we are all authors of self-help and spiritual books. Uh, Something I want to get into in a bit about the specific teachings, but if you look out into the world of nonfiction books, self-help books, inspirational books, um, do you feel that you were represented in the books you were reading along your journey? And I can start by saying I definitely feel like I was as a white person because the majority of books I were reading were by Western white people. But something I never took a moment to consider is that none of these books were written by gay people, and then none
Mm,
of these books were written by um, people who were neurodiverse in any way, and it spoke to
mhm.
a very normative way to be. So, and that's not even something I took a moment to think about until the past couple of years. So I wanted to just, do you feel represented in the inspirational work that you read, Jason?
Most definitely.
Hmm.
My first book at 12 years old was Les Brown, The Greatness Within.
Oh.
There's greatness
Yeah.
within you. Excuse me.
Mhm,
That was my
mhm.
first book that was given to me, and I read it from cover to cover,
Mhm.
and I felt the pain and I felt the transformation that Les Brown had taken for his life, and also the ups and downs of him
Mhm.
starting his own business. And so when I realized that he was there and what he was doing with his life, I knew that it was possible, most definitely possible for me,
Mhm.
no matter what it is, for me to do whatever it is that I want to do with my life. And I also read a book, Think and Grow Rich, The Black Choice by Dennis Kimbrell. So, like, that was also another book that, even though that was written by a Caucasian male, a male African descent created his own version, which I thought was
Mhm.
like phenomenal. And so then I started to meet more and more men that are on the spectrum um, of self help, and then to meet Michael Bernard Beckwith, Reverend Michael Bernard Beckwith, also who I believe is also a self help spiritual enthusiast, and
Mhm.
so just working with him personally is like phenomenal because here I am again learning from someone that transformed their life into what it is today
Yes.
because they were focused. He was on the path of something that he knew was true and what was right for his life. And so to be continue to be taught by so many great individuals, whether it be through books or just being before them, listening and learning from them. I couldn't have written this part of my life at all whatsoever. Couldn't have done that.
Yeah, spoke to you, and they were written by people who, who looked at and represented you. I think that's really positive. Karen?
Well, I grew up in a metaphysical household,
Mhm.
a mystical household. And at that time, every book that I read was written by a white man or a white woman. I, but I was brought up not to see color.
Mhm,
Now I know
Mhm.
that because what I teach is we have to see color. We have to
mhm,
see the nature of every single person, and my color is something that is very important to me. Um, and in these teachings, there's no separation.
mhm,
So we don't talk about. There's no talk about color or class or anything like that. There is a separation in these older books relative to he and she.
mhm,
Mhm.
So
mhm,
a lot of these books are written with just talking about men. So now, as I have moved through, especially being at Agape now for 20 years, and having the rich experience of Reverend Michael, who asks us to let go of titles and all those kinds of things, I really step into the allness of who and what I am. So,
mhm,
Spiritual Liberation, wonderful book by Reverend Michael.
mhm,
Um, I have, and as I think about, I know about Les Brown, of
Mhm.
course. My husband wrote a few books, John Alston.
mhm,
He was one of my greatest teachers. So, yeah, it's very interesting. So to be able to I get to stand in my truth right now. I know that I'm a Black woman. I know that I get to walk this earth plane, seeing individuals and including all individuals in my life because it's good for me. And it's
Mhm.
also good for those individuals as we are operating in this oneness.
Awesome. Hold on to that because I really want to discuss that a bit more in a second. But Cynthia, over to you. Did you feel represented in the books that you read on your spiritual journey?
Um, I think for the most part, it felt like most of the people that were doing the circuit of like self help when I was introduced
Yes.
to this arena. I think it was in the early '90s. Um, Well, the first author I was introduced to her name was Mary Summering, and
Hmm.
she talked about her interaction with her teacher, and her name was No Eyes. So they were
Mm,
Native American, so I didn't
Mm.
necessarily identify with it, but I was enthralled by
mhm,
their interaction. And then the other teachers at the time were like Wayne Dyer, Neil Donald Walsh, and I
mhm.
thought Neil Donald Walsh was somehow unique, that he could talk to God, and God, did I wish that I could talk to God the way.
Yeah.
And I thought he was the exception, right? That there must be something very special about him. So I didn't feel like I was represented, but from very early on, I've always been the odd one in my family to begin with,
Mm,
right?
Hmm.
I didn't quite fit in. I didn't do what everybody else was doing in the family. Even as something as simple as like liking to travel when nobody else in my family traveled, right?
mm,
So I've never really waited to identify with, to explore life.
mm.
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 That's good.
Yeah, that's right. And I think if I say, if I think back to my own journey, it's more in retrospect I can think, oh, these books weren't written by people like me, but I still got so much learning
Yeah.
from the teaching. Um,
Mhm,
Mhm.
yeah, which brings me on to the point that I'm most eager to explore. And in the years we've been doing this panel, I think I'm really going to understand this more today. Um, but there's been so much discussion over the years, and it's very notably since George Floyd was murdered when we first started doing this panel.
mm,
Um, but how a lot of topics in metaphysics, New Age spirituality, and self help can be labeled as white privileged things. And this is
mm.
because they can be seen not to be applicable to someone's life who isn't living at a certain level of privilege. But to use that same word again. So, such for some people to explain how a life that already would have a lot of doors opening for it and a lot of interaction happening, but we give it this universal law of manifestation. Is it actually universal? And especially the topic of forgiveness, which is, I know, is a big principle, but actually how that was something that I stopped talking about a couple years ago because someone said to me, and they very likely were right, um, it's much easier as a white person to talk about forgiveness because there's not been as much to forgive. And
Mm,
I'm not disagreeing with that. But thinking of what Karen said, how these teachings are universal, well, are they universal or are they not? And I, I guess that's my question, but I'm really interested to hear, as spiritual teachers, what you believe about the current conversation around specific topics in metaphysics. Karen?
Well, they are universal. When we talk about universal principles, we talk about things that are eternal, absolute, and Ernest Holmes says permanent. Um, the everything else is temporary. So these
mm,
universal laws are something that we get to that everybody gets to use, no matter what the color of their skin is, because we're talking about consciousness here. We're talking about um, faith and trust in something bigger and higher than we are, that we are one with. So I don't think, and so we're talking about self awareness. I love the idea, Sean, that when all of this stuff has been going on, continues to go on, particularly in the last 3 years, that you were very aware that you are a white gay man who gets to you listened and you
Hmm.
continue to listen. That's very, very powerful because you know that there are different things that are going on that have an appearance of separation, that have an appearance of not being included. And that's our work to do. So I know that as a Black woman, that if I have some forgiveness to do, I do the forgiveness work. And I don't necessarily look at things. Now, this is just me. Other people of color have different experiences. I look at things happening in my life as an individual experience. When
Mm,
I do my work, everyone is benefited by the vibration that I'm carrying in the world.
mm,
Everyone is. It
Yeah.
can't be separated out.
And I really think that speaks to flourishing, and we'll probably get
Mhm.
onto this more in a bit, but flourishing isn't necessarily the language of our times. And I really just want to try and talk about something more cryptically. Recently, I was shortlisted for something, um, and I was very aware that I would have been more useful to this thing if I'd worn my diversity as a handicap in a way, or as a
mm,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
that's it. In some ways, it's very accurate. In some ways, it's just not for me. And I thought, gosh, like to some of the conversations we're having, where we say, I have this diversity, I have this thing, and I'm flourishing in the world. I think that is a powerful place to come from. Question
Yes.
mark.
Mhm.
Cynthia, what would you say to if these principles are universal?
They are. In fact, I was having this conversation yesterday in a class that I'm teaching. And we were talking about how sometimes there's people who say, well, I'm not very spiritual, right? So
Mhm.
if you're poor, you may think you don't have the luxury of
mm,
being able to focus on spirituality. Um, and we're let me just reference like the title of the book, right? Life Finds a Way. And
Mhm.
the image on the cover is of that plant that grows through the crack in the concrete,
Mhm.
and how that's representative, right, of how life is persistent. Um, and that same life is within all of us, whether I grow up in the projects, in the ghetto, because I grew up in Watts, right? But somehow I ended up going to school in Bel Air, which is like the Beverly Hills area for elementary school.
Yes.
wow.
And I used to get bused from my suburb to this very rich area. And one of my friends was African American, one was Filipina, one was from an Indian background, one was Korean. And then there was Rebecca Rich, who lived in the area, right? She was from, and that was her name, and she looked like Richie Rich. So the beauty and the intelligence of the life that was operating through me, right?
Yes.
And then at that point, not even realizing that I was different, that we were different from each other until a teacher pointed out how diverse our group was.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
was like, and it was the first time that I became aware of the fact that we had different skin tones
mm,
until somebody pointed it out to me. Otherwise, I thought we were all human.
mm,
Yes.
And
Yes.
isn't that the truth? So to think to to think that somehow the circumstances of our life are not in our favor to discover the truth of who we are and our potential, that's a handicap,
mhm,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? There are no exceptions to this universal law that all of life is in your favor,
Yes.
as
Yes.
difficult as it may appear at the time as you're moving through it.
Mhm.
Somehow it is here to cultivate you in your flourishing.
mm.
Now, Cynthia, you know some people you might get in trouble for saying what you just said, though I agree with you. You know, um, yeah. Jason.
You know, I was sitting here and I was listening to Cynthia's story, and I thought about mine being moved from the inner city of Buffalo, from a nice part of the neighborhood of Buffalo, out into the suburbs. And I thought about how I was just the opposite of what Cynthia was, how Cynthia was in Bel Air, because I had a father that was raised during the time of civil rights and segregation, and he's from Bessemer, Alabama. And so his experience was like totally different in what he wanted and how he wanted us, me and my sisters, to show up. Um, Not only to have a better life, well, that's more my mother, but he also wanted us to make sure that we were, um, that we just knew who we were and that we stood in that
Yes.
every moment of every day. And I'm going to answer your question, Sean. Trust me.
Oh no,
But
I'm in no rush. Keep going. It's wonderful.
but yeah, but yet what happened was that I took on his energy when I went to an all white school, and only a few of us, a few of individuals of African descent were in that school. A few of individuals that were of Asian and Indian descent were in that school, and here I am trying to carry on an idea, and I get jumped by the men of African descent in that school
Oh, wow.
because they saw the richness in what they had and what they were receiving. I didn't, because I was blocked off and I had blinders.
Mhm.
And I never got to experience what my sisters were able to experience because of their openness.
Oh, beautiful.
Mm.
And so because of that, I was totally closed off. And then I was totally excommunicated because I was not going to allow myself to be in the flow of how everybody else was moving and going. And so I never had the real true opportunity to understand what universally how everyone can and should be able to live and could be able to live. Excuse me, I don't want to shit all over myself. And so in this moment, I think about that time, and I just I know that every moment is a moment for growth and opportunity, Yet it's almost like, Jason, how could your experience have been if you just allowed yourself to be open to everything that's happening?
Yeah.
Mm.
Are the laws universal? Absolutely. I learned that because my uncle saw the need for us to know those universal laws and principles. And I'm so grateful for Joseph Peeler and for what he has done for me in my young life, and how he has brought us up into knowing that God is all that there is. And because of that, my aunt took us to a different level, which introduced us to Reverend Michael.
Mhm.
And so I believe that because I'm seeing more and more individuals that look like me that are taking on these principles. And I don't know if Karen remembers this, but I told Karen, I said, Karen, I need you to be, if you could, please
Oh,
be my Reverend Kathleen,
yeah. Very sweet.
because
Yeah.
it's not so much of the fact that I did not know Reverend Kathleen like a lot of other individuals knew her. I just knew that Karen had a different aura about her that I resonated with, that allowed me to be more in touch with what was going on and how I can continue to show up. And so that's how I know for a fact, without a shadow of a doubt, that these principles are universal, because
Mhm.
I have the opportunity through my uncle, through my aunt, and now through Reverend Michael, now through Karen, to definitely be able to sit and to be and to flourish.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Jason. I find it so. I'm going to contradict myself now, but that's good. That's what we're here for. So I can. This is where I lean into my belief that God God is God. I don't say God is good. I say God is God.
Hmm.
And I think about, so I'm a gay man, um, and it's like I can tell myself a story that my life would be so much easier had I not had that going on. But equally, I can look at God being God, and it's like, oh my gosh, it could have been the biggest uh, handicap to me to have gone through this world as a straight man? Would I
Right.
have the relationships I have? Would I have
Yes.
flourished in the industries I
Mhm.
flourished in? And I don't know the answer indefinitely with data and statistics, but that's a time where I can really feel, where I can say, oh my God, like, thank God God made me gay. Like, that was just the perfect incarnation for Sean Patrick at this time. But then I look out at the world and, well, here I go, Karen, again, looking at the world. um, and the world is easier for certain people to flourish than others? Question mark, Karen.
Well, it goes back to what Reverend Cynthia said,
Mm,
that we are unique individuals, that we, all of us, have been so-called black sheeps in our
mm,
families. We can say that we've been pioneers
Hmm.
because we have taken on this gauntlet, this baton, and we're living our true lives. I
mm,
mean, I can't imagine who you would be, Sean, if you were not fully expressed as a gay man.
Hmm.
mhm,
We know that there have been generations of individuals who know that they were gay, stayed in the closet, and moved through their life. They got married. They had married someone of the opposite sex. They
Hmm.
got married. They had children, and they were miserable.
Mhm.
So flourishing means that we get to live the life that we've come here to live, full
Hmm.
out,
Yeah.
without any kind of thinking what somebody is thinking about us. It's none of their business. We get to live our lives as long, and Ernest Holmes talks about this, as long as we're not hurting or harming ourselves or anybody else, then we get to live the life that we've come here to live. So
Hmm.
that's what I say. Thank you for living your life full out.
And it doesn't bother you that Ernest Holmes was a white man?
No,
No.
no, no. I just have never, when I've seen pictures of Ernest Holmes. My grandmother used to study with him in the 60s. And I think of Ernest Holmes and Joel Goldsmith and all of those individuals that were active in that time, whose readings are part of the curriculum that we study as practitioners,
Hmm.
are brilliant. I don't see their color. I see the soul that is
Yeah.
within them that
Hmm.
is added to my life.
Yeah, and I can really speak to, with my selection of plenty of white teachers to have gone to. I mean, my biggest teachers were Lisa Nichols and Ian Van Zandt.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mhm.
um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes, yes.
Cynthia, I just want to hand over to you to, yeah,
Can
to.
can I can
Oh
I
yeah, of course you
say
can.
something just real quick? Because like I think the more and more like more and more I keep hearing the white difference between white authors and black authors and what have you when it comes to spirituality and self-help. I do want to say when I first started to read the books, I was in a multi-level marketing company, so we had to read like a lot of books uh, um, by
Bob
Zig
Proctor.
Ziglar,
Oh,
by
okay.
Jim
Yeah,
Rohn,
right. Bob
by
Proctor.
right, yeah, right, Bob Proctor,
Yeah.
absolutely, and Dale Carnegie.
Yeah.
So we had to read those books, and so not that we had to, but they were the books that were available to us.
Mhm.
But the one thing I've always saw in those books was that it had a spiritual component to them
Mhm.
Yes.
that opened me up to say, "Oh my goodness, spirituality and quote unquote uh I forgot what the other term is that's opposite of that they call opposite of spirituality, but that was what the Christians say. But so that they can merge, they can be together, that there is no separation.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
that's
I
true.
saw that in the
Mhm,
book, and
mhm.
it was just like, well, what makes me any different that I couldn't do the same or write the same thing? And I
Yeah.
think, and so I never saw color because I didn't know who those people were,
Right.
so it didn't even matter.
Yeah.
But what I did see was that the very spirit that was within them that allowed them to write that book is the very spirit within me that's taken
Yes.
in that information and that really wanted to hold on to something and grab something that was going to allow me to be the best me that I could be. And that's
Yeah.
all I ever wanted to be.
And
So
that's
Jason,
really
go on.
it's really well said, because we see people who have had this evolution, like Wayne Dyer, right?
Yes,
Like
absolutely.
Joe Dispenza,
Yeah.
and Bruce Lipton, Greg Braden,
Mm,
all of these individuals who maybe they were here and eventually they moved to their heart and soul. And after this transformation that they have moved through, because they had power, they continue to have powerful messages to deliver. There is this universal message that is there, that is constant, that is eternal, that is absolute, that is changeless. That's the beauty, that is inclusive. That's
Yeah.
the beauty of all of this, that
Mhm.
allows each and every one of us to flourish.
mhm.
Cynthia, I just want to hand over to you to see what you want to contribute to the conversation or a question for us.
There's so much. Um, I like Karen and so many of you have said, like, I guess I don't pay attention too much to color. What I do pay attention to are perhaps preferences that I have,
Yes.
Mhm.
right? Because it's important for me to try to live life without creating harsh judgments
Mm,
about people. So I allow myself to have preferences, right? And when I think about, like, if everybody in the world would allow themselves to have preferences, would this be a kinder world?
Yes.
mm.
Mhm.
A. The other thing that was coming up for me is like a flashback to the end of the movie, What Dreams May Come, with Robin
Oh,
Williams.
great movie.
I've not
Great
seen that
movie.
movie. You
I
have to tell
haven't
me the
either.
scene.
Oh,
It,
Yeah.
that's a wonderful movie.
Mm.
it came out in 1998, and it was a movie that you have to watch. It was
Mhm,
it was about reincarnation,
mhm.
and him and his wife had this tremendous love affair in this lifetime, and they went through terrible tragedy.
Yeah.
And then they they experience one another in hell and in heaven. They die,
Mhm,
right?
Oh, wow.
And
mhm.
then, but their love is so strong that he invites her to come back to Earth. He's like, we can go back and we can do this again. And
Yeah.
the final scene in the movie, originally they were both Caucasian.
Right.
And for the next thing, and then she's like, but how will I find you? The Earth is so big. And he goes, if I found you in Jersey, I can find you anywhere. And then there's a scene of both of them being born, and she's now being born in India and he's being born in the US.
Yeah.
But they're going to find each other again,
Mm,
right?
Beautiful.
So when we think about the possibility that the soul plans out how it
Mhm.
is that it wants to evolve when it comes here to the planet, and that we are involved in the decision making, right? Of choosing our parents, the
mm,
demographics, the race that we're going to be born into,
Mhm.
the area of the planet of which we're going to come into. And perhaps we don't know all of the details of how things are going to unfold once we get here, but there is a lot of preparation,
mm,
Yes.
right? Because the soul wants to wake up to the truth of itself, and
Mhm.
it wants to be able to access love more easily, right? What we talk about as being unconditional love. It
mm.
might want to be able to forgive at the drop of a hat because it was so hard last time. So it requires, it's like we can't possibly get to know the truth of who we are if everybody was the same.
Right.
If it,
Right.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm, mhm.
Yes. Yes.
I was just thinking when you were saying that, I was like, I wonder why I did not choose to be born into Beverly Hills. And then straight away I heard, because you'd be an asshole. And it's
because
like, oh,
because
that's
you
why. That's
yes,
why.
remember the story that you tell in your book about going to Beverly Hills, coming
Yeah.
here for one of the first times, and you were at the Beverly Hills Hotel or something like that. And you had to have the right jeans and the right look and everything like that. And now, when I would not have right now, I would not like to know that, Sean.
Mm.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. And I know that.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I know
And
that
your
I wouldn't either.
transformation, yes, your transformation has allowed you to be very clear about everything. As Reverend Cynthia is talking, I'm thinking about how we each have freedom of choice.
Hmm.
So we
Yeah.
can say yes to inclusivity that allows our lives to be expanded, or we can say no to to inclusivity, and
Hmm.
we just have to eat. I had a friend who said that her father was only eating brown foods on his plate. Do you know how crazy that is? I mean, it's dull. It's there's no spice in it. There's no color in it.
Right.
We need inclusivity to allow us to experience all,
Hmm.
somebody said this, all the experiences of life. That's what
Yeah.
inclusivity does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so like it's just interesting we're having this conversation because I'm doing a playwriting course right now, and my play is set in Beverly Hills. Where else would I set my play?
Yes.
And you know who came to mind was Jackie Collins, and I was like, oh, she was British writing about, and I was like, oh my god, maybe it's perfect that I'm British because in my head I wanted to be Beverly Hillsian. Like, but I'm like,
Yes.
oh, maybe it's far more interesting. I'm British talking about Beverly Hills. And I'm just saying that when I think about Cynthia's example, my ego brain, the world, I can be like, I wouldn't have chose this, da, 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 da. And actually it's like, oh, it's actually far more interesting and perfect, this
Yeah.
non-straightforward way.
Right. It really
Yeah.
is. Yeah.
All the roads lead to Beverly Hills. Jason, um, anything you'd like to ask of the group or anything particular on this topic you'd like to contribute?
Wow. Thank you. Uh, first of all, second of all, my only question is, statement for the question is, I remember hearing about the fact that being gay, especially as a white male, is white privilege asking for more.
Oh gosh. That's interesting.
I don't understand.
So, so basically, what I remember hearing was that a person that is of Caucasian descent
Mhm.
is gay, which is different from being straight.
Mhm.
And so, but now they're asking to be um, honored and represented as just a person,
Oh, right,
and to be
yeah.
okay for who they are. But they're still using their privilege in order to get that. Like they
Yeah,
still feel like their privilege should allow them to still receive what they're supposed to get, even though they are in some other people's eyes different. And so my question, like, is very interesting because I say this and you said you never heard that, which I think is very
yeah.
interesting. How did you feel when I stated that comment?
I mean, I am complete oh God, how do I put this? Learning more about my queer history, it's very clear to see the gay rights movement has strongly been focused and headed by heteronormative white gay men. So
Mm.
um, I'm not going to say that's good or bad. What I am going to say is, I don't think, and this is where white privilege is definitely a thing, I don't think the community would have seen them same strides if it wasn't for the white gay men to have driven it, or would it have been accepted as much? That's not right. That's the way it unfolded. But I do think, and I'm very clear on this. You know how for the past couple of years there's been this conversation around Karens, not our wonderful
Hmm.
Karen, but
Yeah.
the uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Poor Karen.
poor Karen. I
No,
know.
no, poor
No,
Karen.
yes, true.
No.
She's not taking that. But I do believe, and it may have already started to happen, the next group of people who I believe will be highlighted for that are the the middle class white gay man. Um, I guess I don't know the answer other than to say it's good that the LGBT movement has taken on
Yes.
such strides over the past 10 years, 20 years. It's sad to sit with that probably has only happened because the world was more ready to accept a white community of gay men who were heteronormative in many ways. And yeah, it's like I was born in the late 80s. I had the inner turmoil of being gay, but wasn't that turmoilless.
Right.
And it's not been something that has haunted me throughout my life. In some ways, I can say it does. Like, there's ways I feel physically weaker, or I'm scared of like physical threat. But we've had this conversation on previous years. It's interesting because unlike a skin color, it's something that has to be discovered and assumed. The fact I'm gay doesn't walk into a room. I mean, I think it does, but no one can know for sure. Whereas
Sure. Yes.
Karen can't walk into the room and people go, is she black or is she white? So I do think, and this actually, I remember when we all got together before we had this panel talk the very first time, and I said, because it was just in the wake of George Floyd's murder, I said, one thing we're not going to do is compare being gay to being black, being a woman to being black. And there was a different thoughts within the panel around that. But I was clear on that 3 years ago. They're different conversations that come with different levels of privilege and different levels of problem. That's my long way of not knowing the answer. But,
no, it's all good, because I mean, it's not only was that the statement that was made, it was also, I heard that, because of the women's movement, that Black women are
Yes.
not really represented in the women's movement. And so I ask that, because if it was not for individuals of Caucasian descent that were starting these movements, would other individuals of other descents be represented as well, fully and completely? Since we are talking about inclusivity.
And we're here in Pride Month, which is wonderful. And this was something that someone got to reflect back to me, and I got to go, you're right. If we talk about pride, what probably comes to your head is an image of some muscular, white, handsome gay men. And what you don't see there is not just a more inclusive representation of a gay man, but I believe lesbians get very little shine of the Pride celebration. And once again, that's something that, and this is what I've come to learn about my own white privilege or just my whiteness. I never thought twice about that, because it was representative of me. And it was like, oh, actually, yeah, why don't I see more events at a Pride festival that are for gay women and not gay men? But I wasn't thinking that was my whiteness, that was my gayness. So I'm interested, I guess, over the next couple years, over the next of my lifetime, to see that balance of, because there's both privilege and there's both privilege and being excluded in my situation, and it's that's what I'll say.
Yeah. And what I say is, thank God for white people in all aspects who have been willing to lead all these movements, whether it's whether it's being gay, whether it's being Black or a person of color, a woman. We have not, I think about the civil rights movement. There were white people who were able to access different things that people of color could not, so we couldn't get in. And it can be said about gay people as well. I know that in the Black community, in some families, if you come out gay, then the family says, we don't love you anymore, go away. So I think about RuPaul and those black um, um, uh, um, individuals who cry. These are men who they've created something through their drag, and they still have this sadness because they can't go home. And
Yeah.
then they're embraced by individuals who love them just because they're who and what they are. So white people have gone before us, and now we get to continue to come together and supporting one another in whatever ways we need to support one another. And this is really about inclusivity includes unconditional loving. I think
Mhm.
Reverend Cynthia said that. So we're not withholding our love. We can't. When we don't include individuals, we're saying, we don't want to be around you. We don't want to love you anymore because we see something in you that we don't like.
Mhm.
And what we get to do is to love one another anyway. There's that, I'm thinking about that song, Jason. What the world needs now is love, right?
Sweet love. Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
sweet love. That's what we get to
Mhm.
do. We get to love one another, especially ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So our uniqueness, I love me.
Mhm.
I remember one of my first days at USC, and I was obviously a minority in an organization, a campus that was predominantly Black. And for the first time at 19, 18 or 19, experiencing discrimination. I,
Mhm.
I didn't know. I couldn't. Someone said, so a couple of things. Someone said when I got up to speak, "Oh, you're very articulate." Now we know that can be a trigger for some
Mhm.
people. What do you mean I'm articulate? Of course I am. And I had to receive that and really think about what was being said. It wasn't about me, it was about the person not experiencing anyone like me ever before.
Mhm.
And then there is a time a member of AKA Alpha Kappa Alpha, and we, for the first time then, um, participated in the Panhellenic conference, and we were invited to put on a show with everybody else, all the other white sororities and fraternities. I think maybe the Kappas were invited to um, the black fraternity. When it came our turn for rehearsal to rehearse, all of a sudden the lights didn't work. All of a
Mhm.
sudden the curtains did not open and close. All of a
Mhm.
sudden, and then we continued to do what we did, and then we left the stage, and a white sorority came up, and boom, everything was working again. So, stuff goes on, and then I go to the student, whoever the student faculty representative member was, and I said, "There's discrimination on this campus." And a week later, he called me back in and he said, "We've done an extensive study, and there is no discrimination on this campus." Well, that became an opportunity for me to rise up in my awareness and
Mhm.
to be proud and to represent who and what I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I don't know how to articulate this, but um, I believe that all with various levels of privilege in different ways,
Mhm.
there is experiences we've had with the world, and it's reflecting Reverend Cynthia's point, that may make us believe the circumstances of my life are against me.
Right.
But it's, yeah, that belief. Oh, I don't see. I can't. As a white man, what do I say? Is that belief what is that belief the circumstance that is against us? Since is that
But we have a
yeah.
choice, right? That's what Reverend Cynthia is gonna. I'm sure. Go ahead, Reverend Cynthia.
Well, here's a question I have for you
Yeah.
guys, and it's a question that popped into like
Mhm.
my awareness maybe about 2 years ago, when I was still not yet as as appreciative or as thankful for this life force
Yes.
that's
Yes.
that is me, right? And I visualize God knocking on my door and saying, we need to have a conversation.
Mhm.
And God asking me, why is it that you have allowed the life force that I entrusted you with to be mistreated by others?
Mm.
Mm,
I asked you to be a steward of this much life,
mm.
Mhm.
and you have allowed people to mistreat you, and you yourself have not loved yourself as the divinity that you are.
My God.
Can we talk about that?
Mhm.
Mm.
What would you say if God showed up and asked you if you have been a good steward of the life force that it has entrusted you with?
That's beautiful.
Whew. That's deep.
It really is.
It is. It's a great question. Yeah.
Have
uh,
you?
How
Sorry, go
would
on.
you treat God? Because
I,
that's what you're doing.
Mhm.
in, I would say, like, the one scripture that comes to mind for me is, once I've spoken, twice you've heard it, power belongs to God. But and then we're also taught in these teachings that more and more God is continue to speak to us about the very idea, the very divine idea that is to be expressed through Anazas.
Yes, yes.
And so when I hear that question, and spirit, I believe that's just another way of spirit just saying, excuse me, there's something great for you happening, and I
Mhm.
need you to fall in line,
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
know? And then it's like, well, okay, I will. Yet, what about this, or what about that person? I didn't ask you about that.
Right,
Mm.
right.
I said there's something great happening for you. Fall in
Mhm.
line.
Mhm.
So what would I say? I would say, you know what? If you're gonna keep on tapping, right, on me to do something, then apparently it must be something for me to do.
Yes.
And so, okay, I'll do it, because grace is always sufficient.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so since I know that, and I understand that more and more, I'm gonna fall in line. And then I'm just gonna allow and see the goodness that is to be expressed. So yeah, I'm gonna have a little tug of war sometimes, because there's gonna be moments that I'm worried about what somebody else
Yes, yes.
somebody else thinks or believes about me. But
Mhm.
yet, at the end of it all, I'm gonna go, and I'm allowed to go begrudgingly and kicking and screaming, but I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, yeah. And I am too. Whenever I hear a question like that, I always think there's more for me to do.
Mm,
So I'm listening always, and I'm guided and directed. Now, I couldn't say this a couple of years ago because I wasn't as confident or feeling as worthy as I am right now.
Mhm.
Um, I believe that we're each here at this particular time to reveal more of this presence. And I mean, in the books that we've written, we
Mhm.
get to reveal more of it. We get
mm,
to let people know about from whence we have come and what is possible. And because we are doing this work, everybody else gets to do it. That's the
mm.
teaching of Jesus the Christ.
Mhm.
Now, um,
He probably wasn't a white man.
He
Probably not.
probably
He probably
wasn't a
was not a
white
white man.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yet, there are some people who believe that he was, and perhaps he is, and perhaps it's because of the unworthiness that they're feeling inside of
Mm,
themselves.
Mhm.
Jesus couldn't have been a man of color. Couldn't have been. Well, I believe that he had to be a man
mhm,
of color. He had to.
mm,
And part of the teachings is this and greater things shall ye do.
mhm,
So the idea that God created each of us and wants to express fully as each of us, that's our direction right there.
mm,
And I was talking before about loving unconditionally. So that's one of my practices. When I feel as though I'm not loving myself or someone else
Mhm.
unconditionally, I it rings in my heart, and then I move forward. Oh yeah, I can do this. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm I'm absolutely, I have everything that I need to move forward because I've heard it. I've heard what is mine to do. So yeah, I love that question, Reverend Cynthia.
Right?
And
Like,
what that makes me think of is a great little saying that I've been using to snap myself back recently, where I just say, well, do I believe God's a sadist? No. So therefore, what's the problem?
Yeah.
and I feel that
Like, it's like, sorry, I think I lost everyone.
no, you're good.
Yeah, Karen knows this. I can go down. I can go down a path with the best of them. Of oh my god, and actually, I think that like as I said, well, is God a sadist? Do I believe God's a sadist? No, I can't get there no matter how hard I try. So
Right,
therefore,
right.
how could this not be for me? That's something I've not said in 3 years because
Hmm.
I'm a white man. But to 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 say it today, that's how I kind of get myself. Well, I don't believe God's a sadist, so this must be okay, or this must be good. And to use that same terminology, it's like God's never been a sadist, but I have definitely been a masochist. Like I have
Hmm.
inflicted pain, limitation, smallness, and it's like
Yes.
God was never doing any of that. Like he wouldn't need to.
Right.
And they are the, and that's where I can snap myself back into. God's not a sadist. This must be okay. Let's go forward. And so, Karen, that's something really good. Like, so often if I go to Karen with a problem, she'll say, but it got you here. And it's like, oh yeah. So now I'm here. Oh yeah. And yeah, and another great one, like if I'm complaining, like I'm worried about something, Karen will go, but they're human beings.
Yeah, let human beings do what they do. We are responsible only for ourselves. And we get to, through our spiritual practices and all of meditation, of prayer, of light visioning, we get to, as I said before, vibrate and lift everyone up around us up. Reverend Michael recently said in our class with Reverend Cynthia that we bring the vibration.
Mm,
We bring
mhm,
it.
mhm,
So
Mhm.
when we walk into a space, there's no longer the idea that we have to match everyone else's vibration. No, we carry the vibration and we allow others to match us. So what
mhm.
that means is that we don't lower ourselves to fit in.
I
We
used to tell
shine. Yes.
I used to tell people in my family when I first started at Agape, like 12 years
Mhm.
ago, and I started learning about like boundaries and self-care.
Yes.
And I would say, I can't go to Crazyville. You have to come to normal.
That is
That's
so,
so
that
good.
is so
That's good.
and that's, and what you're saying is that I'm not fitting into this stuff. I'm not fitting into this worldly stuff. I
Yeah,
can't
No.
do it. I'm more than this.
yeah,
That is so beautiful. That's flourishing.
yeah.
It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Well,
Yeah.
this top I am wearing today, Karen, don't know if you remember, I was with you when I bought this, and we were
Oh,
walking to the cat, and I said, oh, I need to check the price tag on this. She says, are you kidding me? You're a child of God. Do you think you can't afford this sweater? And they're my favorite moments with Karen.
yes.
That is Karen at her flourishing best. Like, are you kidding me? You're a child of God. Why would you have to check the price tag?
And that's one of the things that happens. Like, that's why I asked you guys that question, because I think as we start to recognize and believe our
Yes.
preciousness and our
Yeah,
worth,
yeah,
then it's hard not to recognize the preciousness and worth of all life as we witness
Yes.
it, all
mhm,
individuals.
Yes.
So it really starts with us,
Mhm.
mhm,
right? The recognition of our preciousness, our divinity.
Mhm.
And that's why, like, even as we were moving through this time after George Floyd, where people were pointing out white privilege, and people were getting down on their knees, and I was like, you're God. What are you doing?
Yes.
mhm,
Yes. Yes.
Everyone is God.
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
So when God asked that question, like, have you been a good steward of the life force that I entrusted you with? And then the next question will be, and how did you treat the life force as everybody else?
Right.
mhm,
Absolutely.
mhm,
And
Absolutely.
and a lot of us want to just do life right. We want to
Mhm.
do it as well as possible. So it's like, because of that, because I follow rules, right? It's
Mm.
like
Yes,
as
yes.
when it's time to tally up the bill with spirit as far as this incarnation goes, I want to make sure I did it as good right as I could.
Mm. Yes,
Yeah,
yes. Yes, it's beautiful.
and I think just a something to probably just our closing statements, but it speaks to we've all written books. Cynthia, Life Finds a Way. Jason, The Essential Pain and Peace of Life. Jason, just in your title, you speak to because there's so much talk right now about what is toxic positivity. Like we're being
Mm,
told things that may or may not be true, or we're being beat over the head with bypassing and just be positive. But I think something that's present in all of our work is what Jason's title is, there is pain and peace in life. And
yes.
going back to what I said about, I don't say God is good, I say God is God, because it doesn't have to look a certain way for it to be right for me or it to be
Mm,
best for me.
that's
Um,
good.
yeah, and I just think for everyone's closing statement, I just really, I want to just lean into that, especially with everyone's book about how, well, how did you progress from, if you ever were one of them people that wanted everything to be positive all the time
Mm.
because God is good all the time and my life will only make sense if it looks a certain way, because that's not what any of us write or represent in our work. So Cynthia.
So, and even now, right, it's ongoing. The
Mhm.
amount of let go of control to feel
Mhm,
safe in life,
Yes,
Mhm.
yes.
and the
mhm,
simultaneous cultivation of you say you believe in God and you say you trust in God, and is that true? Because I'm
mhm.
asking you to get on the roller coaster and put your hands up again. I'm
Mhm,
asking,
mhm. Yes.
right? Anytime I
Yes.
enter into something that is unknown, but how beautifully it continues to unfold, even with the book. I opened up
Mhm.
my email yesterday to an invitation from a Centers for Spiritual Living in Jamaica,
Oh wow.
and
Mm. Wow.
Yes.
they want me to do a workshop based on the book and to
Mhm.
be the speaker at their 42nd year anniversary.
Oh, how wonderful.
Wow.
Yes, yes.
And I didn't want to let go of my legal job in 2018 that I had been in for almost 30 years, right?
Mhm.
Because how was I going to take care of myself?
Mhm,
Mm.
mhm.
But life is intelligent, and it knows what it's up to with me, and it
Yes.
keeps bringing me these experiences that are inviting me to do things I've never done before, including
Mhm,
writing the book.
Mhm.
Thanks to you.
mhm.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
yeah, it reminds me that, there are these so-called highs and lows in life.
Mhm.
And what I have been practicing over the last couple of years is that there's goodness in the appearance of the high, and there's goodness in the appearance of the low,
Mm.
because there is an opportunity for me to learn something, to grow. So um, I'm realizing that there is no duality in God. Really,
Mhm.
there's no duality. Some people say, why does this happen? Why did this happen? Well, because there's an opportunity for me to grow and expand. That's why it gets to happen.
Mhm.
And when I say yes to something, that when I release my resistance, when I trust in His presence that is always for me, then I get to move forward in my life. If I say, no, I don't want to do that, then I stay in this unexpansed space. I don't get to grow. I don't get to grow. So I see good in everything.
Mhm.
We're planning for this big practitioner weekend at Agape, and
Yay!
yay! And we are one of the speakers that the main speaker that we wanted to have, that we set this time around, couldn't couldn't happen.
Yeah.
And I thought that he's where he's supposed to be. We're doing what we're supposed to do, and
Mhm.
that's the being in the rhythm and the flow of God. So
Mhm.
being in the rhythm and the flow of everything without any judgment, knowing that there is goodness that is unfolding. That's what I am and allowing, and all of my needs are met all the time.
Hmm.
I just
Hmm.
get to sit back and say yes. There
Hmm.
may be some no's in there because I want to experience some kind of a boundary,
Some preferences.
some
Well,
preferences.
yeah,
Yes, thank
I'm
you very
pointing
much.
down
I
because that's
love
where
that.
Cynthia is on
That's
my
where
screen.
Cynthia
Yeah.
is. Yes, that's the word. There's a preference there. I prefer to do this instead of doing that.
Hmm.
And with all of that, I practice forgiveness. I practice unconditional law.
Hmm.
I let go of comparing myself to anybody else because we're all on our own individual journey. And I do believe that everything is working together for my good all the time, all the time.
Hmm.
Jason, anything to close on?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm starting to realize more and more as I'm unfolding in my present life that when we had the party for my father last month, and my uncle surprised him. It was a surprise party anyway, but he didn't even know they were coming.
Yeah.
So he was surprised two times. And so, but yet my experience with my uncles was very, very interesting because the one thing they asked me, because they were going to give me some money, but they asked me how much do I want, and I couldn't answer
Mm.
Mhm.
because I was never asked what I wanted. I was never in that
Mhm.
practice.
Mhm.
Does
Mhm.
that make sense? And
Yeah.
Yeah.
so to sit there and to be catatonic, and then to realize that now spirit is asking me, what do I want?
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Mhm.
Mhm.
It's an amazing feeling
Mhm.
because I was never asked what I ever wanted and that it was just going to be given to me.
Mhm.
And I have and I've just been told that I've moved through this life. As I said earlier, I moved through this life wanting to have more and more of what it is that I know that I rightfully desire, that I
Yes.
rightfully that I'm rightfully to have in my life. And that's why when when we had that session, Sean and Karen, and pain, talking about pain came up,
Mhm.
it was very, very poignant to speak about that
Yes.
because individuals are brushing under the things under the rug and not looking at it and not facing it. And I believe that the more and more I face it, the more and more I get to see me face to face, and then I am able to wipe away the grit of the journey, as Reverend Michael would say, and I am able to now see the wholeness that I am in its fullness, and
Yes.
I am able to now step into it. And then when I'm asked what I want, I'm not going to be catatonic like the deer in headlights anymore.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mhm.
And so I believe that's why this movement that I am on, this movement that I'm leading, into stepping in to your fullness by looking at every aspect. I think Reverend, I call him Reverend, Brother Tete said it so well
Mhm.
when he spoke. He stated that God is in everything. God
Yes.
is in the good. God is in the seemingly bad.
Mhm.
God is in the tornadoes. God is in the hurricanes.
Yes.
So when I begin to see that in my life, and I get to see God everywhere, then I am able to see that there is something for me to learn and to know more and more about who Jason is. And that's why I believe it's so important. It is so important to be able to face the hurt no matter what it is because it's going to bring you to such great, grand, and glorious ways where the freedom is expressed and felt in your body like never before.
Mhm.
I'm going to stop there.
No, that's everything that really drives us home
Yes.
to flourishing. So
Mhm.
thank you so much. Thank you all so much for being part of this conversation this year. We are the Good House. If you have a nonfiction book idea, please get in touch with us. Go to tghbooks.com, or you can email me or Karen directly at Sean or Karen at tghbooks.com. Thank you all so much for spending this time with me and Karen.
Yes, yes. Wonderful,
Yes.
wonderful. Thank you, thank
Thank
you.
you so much.